A lot of cool games came out in 2022. I feel like this is one of those years where everybody got at least one game that feels specifically tailored to them. God of War Ragnarok, Bayonetta 3, Kirby and the Forgotten Land, Xenoblade Chronicles 3, Overwatch 2, Horizon Forbidden West, Splatoon 3. It just feels like so many games came out this year that so many different people were able to enjoy. And I barely played any of them. Look, I'm sorry guys, I just didn't have the time. I haven't played a single second of any of these games I've been using footage for here. Every time some big new release would come out and everybody would tell me to play it, I'd stumble upon some weird indie game nobody had ever heard of and play that instead. I did end up playing a ton of really great games this year, but, very few of them actually came out in 2022. So this isn't really gonna be a best of list for this year, just a roundup of the coolest stuff that I played the last 11 months. I just figured it would be fun to make a little video rounding up all the assorted stuff I've really enjoyed this year, so consider this a big list of recommendations more than anything else. And yeah, I know we've still got a little bit of time left in the year, but I want to devote that to working on another big video project, which you should hopefully see pretty soon. But for now though, let's just jump into the 15 coolest games that I played in 2022. An extremely atmospheric indie horror title that I was only able to accurately describe as David Cronenberg's prop hunt, Perfect Vermin is everything you could want from a shorter free game. The game involves searching around an office building while on a time limit, and whacking furniture with a sledgehammer in order to find the items that seem out of place. While it only runs about 30 minutes in total length, it uses its brief runtime in constantly exciting and interesting ways. The mechanics never get stale here, and are able to introduce a surprising amount of ideas on top of its relatively simple premise, and the horrific atmosphere is constantly growing more uneasy and discomforting over time. The game's first few minutes are honestly still my favorite part, expertly establishing the core mechanic before delivering a genuinely surprising twist on the expected. The game's short, but it is extremely sweet. No filler here. And did I mention that it is completely free on Steam? So you've got no reason not to go check this out. Speaking of great, short, uncomfortable, but in a good way sorts of game experiences, I also played Milk Inside a Bag of Milk, and its sequel, Milk Outside a Bag of Milk. Yeah, they're probably the weirdest game titles I've ever heard, but honestly, that's only the tip of these games' strange and unorthodox presentations. Two fairly short visual novels, these games follow a young girl on her trip to the store to buy some milk, and somehow turn this simple everyday task into one of horrifying cosmic terror. The visual style is eerie and unnerving, and the writing is extremely strange and often difficult to fully parse, mostly due to its translation from Russian. That odd translation actually helps the game's atmosphere immensely in my eyes, as the tone of the dialogue seems to constantly fluctuate in ways that cause feelings of genuine uneasiness. While this is two games, and both have slightly different vibes to them, with the second being more focused on the protagonist's home life, both work best when played back to back, so I'm going to count them as one here. These games do an excellent job at trapping you within the mind of its protagonist, and are simultaneously strange and incomprehensible, while also being oddly relatable at times. They're certainly weird experiences, but I think they're experiences that are definitely worth having. Okay, I'm gonna be entirely honest with you here. I played Unsighted back in January, right after I got my COVID vaccine, and my body reacted really poorly to it, so I was mostly delirious throughout this entire playthrough. But, the parts I can actually remember were really fun. This game is definitely going for an old school Zelda vibe with its dungeons and world design, but I actually got really strong Hyper Light Drifter energy from it, which is an extremely good thing to feel about a game. Its combat is quick and snappy with a wide variety of fun weapons to pick from, the dungeons have really great designs that loop back around on themselves in surprising ways, the central time management gimmick is surprisingly engaging, and requires you to really plan out your playthrough in order to save time, and even the boss fights are pretty challenging. While I can't say that this game absolutely excels in any one particular category, it does everything pretty damn well. which is honestly just as important sometimes. I've loved everything Supergiant Games has ever made, but their games can feel a bit samey sometimes. They tend to utilize the same isometric camera angle, have some similar combat, and feature stories that kind of flow together in my head from time to time. And then they decided to go ahead and make a basketball game. Pyre is absolutely delightful. A bizarre combination of sports game, party-based RPG, and visual novel, the game features some of the best connection between gameplay and story that I've ever seen in the interactive medium. Every choice you make regarding your team, how you spend your time, and the relationships you form with your squad have a direct narrative impact, but also a direct mechanical impact on how you play. The magical basketball game that lies at the center of all this is also pretty engaging, featuring a really nice combination of strategy and reflex mechanics, and even comes with a really cool multiplayer mode. There's basically nothing else out there that's quite like Pyre, and I really hope Supergiant does something else weird and different with whatever they make next. Inscryption is a game that asks a bold question. What if Slay the Spire was twisted and evil? It's no secret that Inscryption's first act is by far its strongest. It's got this great, eerie, Halloween-y atmosphere, and pits you up against Leshy, one of my new all-time favorite game antagonists. The card gameplay isn't the absolute strongest in the genre, and it's definitely a bit broken at times, but it's supported by some absolutely incredible atmosphere, and some really mechanically interesting gimmicks, like being able to make a card out of each of your failed runs. The game's second act is definitely a bit of a low point, but it brings things back hard with the absolutely batshit crazy final act and ending. I really can't say too much without spoiling what this game even is or turns into, but it's by far one of the most unique experiences I've had with the game in recent memory, and also serves as an absolute love letter to card games as a whole. It's got a few ups and downs in quality, yeah, but overall, this is absolutely a game worth your time. Alright, so people are probably gonna revoke my indie gamer license for this, but I can't say I've ever really been the biggest fan of Yume Nikki. While the game undeniably has a lot of great concepts and cool secrets, the majority of the game is basically just walking around and looking at environments that honestly didn't leave too much of an impression on me. However, absolutely none of this applies to the best Yume Nikki fan game, .flow. Okay, well, except for the wandering around part. There's still a lot of that. But the environments are so much cooler! This game leans heavily into the horror aspects that are hinted at in Yume Nikki, but never really take center stage. Here, however, they're right at the forefront of the game's whole experience. The whole game has this great, uneasy ambiance as areas that you've previously visited begin to rot and crumble apart, making the dreamlike maze of its world even more difficult and engaging to navigate. The story here also, at least to me, feels a bit more comprehensible than Yume Nikki's, despite still totally lacking dialogue like its predecessor. This is everything that I think fan projects should be, a focus on one particular aspect of an original project, with a diversion of much more attention towards it in order to create a similar but tonally distinct new experience. Games have always had a weird relationship with romance. While there have been attempts in the past to create believable romantic relationships between characters, it always just feels a bit strange when only one of the participants is a real person, and the other is just designed to respond to what you say in specific ways. Enter Haven, one of the very few games I have ever seen that pull something off like this in a remotely believable way. By tasking the player to control both members of the relationship at different times, it causes them both to come off as much more human and real, and it's very easy to find yourself invested in their relationship. This is also helped significantly by their extremely talented voice actors, and the whole experience is tied together by some great visuals and an absolutely phenomenal soundtrack. Sure, the actual gameplay loop is a bit repetitive, and the combat doesn't even really need to be in the game, but both do their jobs by reinforcing the relationship between the protagonists through direct player interaction. Plus, it's really cool that you get to pick the genders of both characters. That's a lot of effort the team really didn't need to put in, but it really helps people immerse themselves in this kind of narrative. It's honestly kind of insane to me that after making Fury a crazy balls-to-the-wall action game, the team decided to turn around and make basically the exact opposite game. But I actually have a ton of respect for them for being able to pull it off this well. Okay guys, I'm about to come at you with an insanely hot take. Terraria is pretty good. I know, you're all shocked. But what if I was to tell you that there was a way to take Terraria and make it goofy as hell? The Terraria Calamity Mod is probably the single most impressive mod I have ever seen for any game. Almost an entirely new experience. Calamity Mod adds dozens of new enemies and bosses, acting as almost a full sequel rather than just a fan expansion. Its tone is also decidedly different from the base game, leaning heavier into ridiculous boss fights and cheesy Metal Gear Rising-esque music that works shockingly well in context. I've actually been using some art that my friend drew of me versus the final boss of this mod as my channel banner, and the fights actually feel as epic as this art implies. It can definitely feel a bit overwhelming jumping into this after base game Terraria, and I'd be lying if I said I fully understood a bunch of the crafting recipes or how to summon some of the late game bosses, but if you get a couple friends together and play this like an insane JRPG party, you are guaranteed to have a damn good time. Buddy Simulator 1984 is an uncomfortably realistic depiction of friendship. What begins as a simple text adventure with an AI companion evolves into a heartbreakingly understandable depiction of what happens when a friendship starts to fall apart. This game and its story just come across as so genuine and understanding, and is easily one of the most emotionally impactful games I've played all year. Not all of its horror aspects work, but the underlying narrative is so strong and ends on such a high point that I wouldn't want to spoil for anyone. I don't even want to spend too much time describing this game and what it becomes. Trust me, you want to go into this as blind as you possibly can. It's basically like if Doki Doki Literature Club was good. I mean, what?
Ethan Winters, welcome.
See guys, I occasionally play AAA games too. Resident Evil 8 is immensely stupid, and I love it. There's vampires, werewolves, evil dolls, a fish man, a big demon baby, Nicolas Cage with Magneto powers. This game is truly on another level of crazy bullshit. It is exceptionally rare for any big studio to go this insane with a big release like this. But that's just what makes RE8 stand out so well in the modern AAA industry. I think this is probably my favorite game in the series, although 4 and the remake of 2 do give it a run for its money, just because of the pure nonsense of it all while still containing a few moments of actual horror and a really satisfying gameplay loop of resource management. I have no idea how this series is ever going to go back to just shooting zombies after this. The absolute best thing about roguelikes as a genre is when they are fully willing to be broken as hell. A roguelike that is always fully balanced and never allows for complete steamrolls never really allows the player to feel super powerful, and like they're actually getting better at the game. While one that lets you be busted makes you feel like you're an absolute god. Risk of Rain 2 takes this concept and then skyrockets it to the goddamn moon. This is the most broken game ever made, and it's awesome.
Look at my damage!
You amass so many items during this game that, even as the difficulty is constantly ramping up, you can eventually just one-shot every enemy like the Terminator on speed. The feedback loop of constantly getting money in order to spend on items is such a powerful one, and the constant interaction from the player feels like injecting serotonin directly into your veins. Item combos are insanely busted, and runs can feel like complete and utter nonsense after a while, but that's just the beauty of it all. Your computer fan may sound like a jet engine after running this game for a while, but at least that computer will go out in an insane blaze of glory before it crashes and burns. Hypnospace Outlaw is one of the most profoundly empathetic pieces of fiction that I have ever experienced. While most depictions of the internet in media tend to portray it as a mean place full of weirdos and creeps, Hypnospace Outlaw fully embraces the eccentricities of online interaction and portrays them as the ultimate representation of what makes us human. Everybody online is just living their life unimpeded as whatever version of themselves they want to be, and Hypnospace is more than willing to find the beauty in that. If you've ever stumbled upon some weird rabbit hole online, and delved as far down as you can just to see where it goes, Hypnospace is the game for you. Its alternate reality internet is shockingly believable, and so much effort is put into making the characters you interact with only over the screen feel so authentic. And did I mention that it's also one of the funniest games ever made? Like, seriously, there's just so much good stuff in here.
I don't buy a round of drinks, I buy a square. When I smoke cigars, I only smoke them in pairs.
Out of every game on this list, this is the one that I will most likely make a full video on someday. It's just so funny and sad and personal, and a perfect encapsulation of what being on the internet is actually like. Speaking of games with a profound sense of empathy, Disco Elysium offers up probably the most believable environment that I have ever seen in a game. Despite only showing a few city blocks in-game, Martinez feels like such a real place you could realistically visit, and the people that populate the game's world feel equally understandable. The voice acting added in the final cut helps tremendously with this, lending such an aura of legitimacy to every weird and wonderful inhabitant of this strange but familiar world. Disco Elysium is also probably the most role-playing game ever made, with a tremendous variety in how you can approach situations, and so much easily missable dialogue based entirely on player agency. The game's skill system is one of the most expressive leveling systems ever, allowing for complete control over how your character interacts with the world. Forgoing more basic skills like strength and charisma in favor of more relatable and understandable skills like empathy, logic, composure, and encyclopedic knowledge creates such a strong through line between player and protagonist, and has all but permanently altered the way that I think about situations in my own life and how I respond to them. The word immersion gets tossed around a lot in games discussion, but Disco Elysium is one of the very few games to make me really understand what that can mean. It is a masterpiece in every sense of the word. I love Brutal Orchestra so much, man. Never before have I come across a game that feels so clearly made for me specifically. From the massive variety of party members, to the absolutely phenomenal soundtrack, to the single greatest turn-based combat system ever made, every aspect flows together so well to create such a phenomenally enjoyable and infinitely replayable roguelike. I'm not gonna say that this is a game that's gonna be for everybody, but those who it is for will absolutely fall in love with it. And it's still getting updates. They just added a fish you can put in your party, who is hilariously useless, and I love him. I've certainly got more to say about this game, but I hear some guy made like a 25-minute video explaining it in more detail, so maybe I should just go check that out. It's Elden Ring. Hey, what do you know? A game that actually came out this year. quite possibly the most hyped up video game ever made. Fans of From Software have long dreamt about the possibilities of an open-world Souls game designed with all the lessons the developer has learned from its many incredible games in mind. So, now that Elden Ring has been out for so many months, does it fully live up to that massive hype? Nah, not really. But man, it's still really good. It's certainly got its stumbles like some bad bosses, an overuse of reused content, and a noticeably weaker last few areas. But in the face of the massive amount that this game gets right, you barely notice. It offers dozens of fun and varied build options to play the game exactly how you want, features some of the best boss fights in the whole series, offers a gigantic world full of gorgeous locations that are well worth exploring, and also has like the best voice acting in the industry.
Have it writ upon thy meager grave, felled by King Morgoth, last of all kings.
The months following this game's release is the closest I have ever seen the internet come to true world peace, and watching everybody I have ever known play this game and share their different experiences is one of the coolest things I have ever seen come out of this medium. Elden Ring is a miracle video game. In an industry full of unfinished AAA releases and big budget games more focused on being movies than actually taking advantage of what the medium has to offer, Elden Ring blew the whole industry wide open by being a capital V video game. It gets what makes games fun and acts as such a glorious culmination of everything FromSoft games do well, even if Sekiro is still my favorite of their games overall. Even in a year where I played so many great titles, Elden Ring stands above all of them for just being such a memorable experience that I'm so glad I got to share with so many. Also, it's got Godskin Duo, baby! Best fight in the series!